In a world of misery and depression, how can one be happy? Hello and welcome to Wayland's Wisdom. The topic of happiness is a very misunderstood one, and the pursuit of happiness is also very misunderstood. Most people, or a lot of people, when trying to pursue happiness, particularly if they are or have been depressed, do so in a very odd starting point. You see, a lot of people don't know what happiness is, and they confuse happiness with joy or perhaps more accurately excitement. But happiness isn't these things. Happiness in the way in which we need it to be should be more similar to contentment. That your base emotion isn't sadness or despair or doom or depression, but rather your base emotion should be somewhat neutral. Because if you're happy all the time, it can become exhausting. Happy in the sense of excitement. And so when people go out to find happiness, they'll do so in very exciting ways, which is fair enough. You know, if you're going out to do something that you know is going to be, or hope is going to be exciting, then that's fine. But if you're going out to find contentment through skydiving, for instance, I think you'll become very disappointed very quickly. So set your standards lower for happiness, and I do mean that somewhat sincerely, although I use um, less than optimal phrasing for it. But upon understanding that you're not going to be jumping with joy all the time, going around with a smile on your face like some kind of mentaloid, but rather if you understand that happiness is more so an approach to things and a having a base level of calmness and uh, contentment, then finding happiness will be far easier and being happy will be far easier. Now, I don't like to give advice too much because, one, I am young, I haven't experienced all there is in life, and my opinions on things will change almost definitely. But if there's one thing I know, it is how to be happy when things aren't going so well, and also what it's like to be depressed or sad when things are basically all right. You see, there is a phrase, and that is you've got to find yourself. And it's thrown around a lot, and it doesn't really mean anything, um, especially as those who use it don't know what they mean, and two, don't actually mean anything by it. But if we look at the phrase deeper, in a much more realistic sense, in a traditionalist sense, and maybe even an evolutionary sense, we can find that we should, rather than be looking at our ego or the personality that we think we have, we shouldn't really be looking at our personality much at all, but rather our physicality. I am a person who is like this. Uh, I'm a person who looks like this, has this height, has this amount of muscle, has this particular advantage in some sport or activity. Uh, and by activity, I mean literally anything, whether you're good at pushing things or good at pulling things, whether you're good at running long distance or running short distance, whether you're good at walking or whether you're good at standing. Just these simple things, knowing what you're good at physically, will open so many more doors for you in understanding yourself than first you realize. Because a lot of our modern idea of philosophy is very rooted in the subconscious, in the mind, rather than the actual physical body in which you inhabit. It's like being an employee of a company and thinking, well, I'm really good at this thing, and I know that I can do well at this and that. So therefore, I should be on, say, 100 grand a year. Now, if the company itself doesn't have enough money to give you 100 grand a year, then you're not going to get 100 grand a year, unless, of course, you move to a different company. But let's say you're stuck at this company for whatever reason. The company can't give you 100 grand, so you're never going to get 100 grand. In much the way that if you are stuck in a body that has no legs, then you're not going to walk like other people. You're going to walk in a very particular way, if you can walk at all, um, depending on how much of your legs you have left. But if you have no legs, then you can't walk. It's as simple as that. You're not going to be a sprinter unless science progresses to the point where we can give people new joints from them not having any joints or any muscle or cartilage in their legs, or in their pelvis rather. So if you have no legs, then you're not going to find joy in walking because you can't walk. If you're blind, you're not going to find joy in paintings because you can't see them. Now, of course, these are very extreme examples, but if you can apply it to far less extreme examples, say, for instance, you have rheumatoid arthritis in your hands, then you're going to find it difficult to find joy in playing guitar, unless, of course, playing guitar soothes your rheumatoid arthritis, which I don't think is the case. Correct me if I'm wrong. But you'll have to find things that you're not having to use digital dexterity for. And so you'll have to find joy in perhaps walking through nature, or walking through an art gallery if you're particularly interested in paintings. But I should say on that you shouldn't be finding joy in merely material things, but knowing your limits, and knowing also, but possibly even more importantly, knowing your capabilities will open the door for future happiness. So knowing what you can find joy in, knowing what you already do find joy in, are things which will help. But you shouldn't rely on these things. You shouldn't rely on activities, on hobbies, on vices and that kind of thing to have happiness. But there are principles of happiness. And those are very simple. They're time tested. People have known these things for a long time. And I shall list them. One, and I think one of the most important things to happiness, is community, is family, is your friends, your kin, your mother and father, your brother and sister, your husband or wife, your children, those people who are related to you either by blood or by proximity. To have communication with them and to have trust in each other are of the utmost importance for your happiness. But there is one very important thing that you must remember in finding joy in your community, and that is to not have too much hope in particular people. One of the driving causes of sadness among people that I've seen is putting too much hope in a person or a few people, and that person or people letting them down in some way. I've seen this in family members and in friends, and I've seen it in very, very extreme cases where someone has put so much hope that it becomes an obsession into a particular person. And when that person lets them down in some way, that the person who the hope has been put into, not knowing that they've done anything particularly wrong, and most likely not even having done anything wrong, is then confused as to why so and so has put that trust in them. and it becomes stressful for them as well. So don't put trust in people to the extent that you're elevating them to a superhuman level, to such an elevated position that they will then depress you when they let you down. And it's not an easy thing to do, but it is a very important thing to do, to keep people at the level that they are at, to not underestimate them too much and not to overestimate them. Because if you underestimate them, they'll soon no longer be your friend. And if you overestimate them, they will quickly become your enemy. Another factor is physical health. This seems obvious, but people don't really think about it too much, other than, well, it's good to be healthy. Well, why is it good to be healthy? Well, because you then don't die as soon. But that's not even always the case. Sometimes people who are incredibly healthy have a random heart attack at 35 and they're dead and gone. But being healthy does mean that you're able to enjoy material things far better. You're able to enjoy community through going to the gym, through running, through gymnastics, whatever sport that you're into. You'll have another community there. You'll likely be around longer, of course. And so if you have children, you'll be better able to parent them in a much more active way. You'll be able to spend time with those you love in a much more active way. And your mind will be clearer because if you're not feeding your body poison and letting it rot, then your mind should then be clearer. And you will have that, you will not have that worry that, well, I'm unfit, I'm unhealthy, I'm this and that. And so your mind is clear to evaluate the other parts of your life that perhaps you are unhealthy in, whether that's hobbies or vices or just your outlook on things. And that brings me on to another important fundamental, having a good outlook on life. Now, that's a very broad statement, and it's one that people have been trying to figure out for millennia. And I think people have got very, very close to the true answer for having a good outlook on life. One of the easiest ways to have a good outlook on life is to follow the ways of the Stoics. Now, I don't suggest being a Stoic, and I don't suggest following their ways if you want to reach a truly healthy outlook on life. But it is a good starting point, and it's a good way of having some of those parts that add into or go together into creating a good outlook on life. Now, the Stoics were my first real introduction into philosophy, but more so into the self-help side of philosophy, into the kind of the personal mental side of philosophy, rather than thinking about how the universe works and how people work and all that. It's more so, Stoicism is more so a very personal thing in terms of what people know it as and teach it as, rather than teaching its more metaphysical side of things. But it is a good starting point to not worry so much about things you can't control, to practice being uncomfortable so you can better appreciate comfort. These are all very good tools, and these are tools that I still try to carry with me in my daily life today. But it does come a point where Stoicism works completely the opposite way round. And if you're saying to yourself, why am I reacting so violently, whether emotionally or physically, to the context I'm in? But surely I should be stoic about it. Surely I should be unfeeling and all this kind of thing. Then, for one, you've probably you've taken things either too literally or taken them to their extreme conclusion. But also, it does, if you're trying to hold to Stoicism, you can find yourself in a situation where you're thinking, well, obviously I'm not doing this hard enough, I'm not doing this well enough. And there's obviously something wrong with me if I'm reacting to the context I'm in so unstoically. But at the end of the day, bad things do feel bad. If someone hits you with a car, and if you can get past the physical pain, you're still going to be annoyed that you've been hit by that car and that it's taken time away from you that you could have spent on things otherwise. So it's not a bad thing to be annoyed or to be angry or anything like this. It's just what you do with your annoyance and your anger. It's what you do with your bad emotions. You shouldn't be striving to no longer have negative emotions. In fact, negative emotions are incredibly helpful. Anger spurs determination and drive. Annoyance spurs creativity and more so in fixing problems. Sadness, it can drive you to again fix problems, whether physical or not physical. It's okay to have negative emotions, especially if you are trying to practice stoicism. It's about what you do with those negative emotions and whether or not you let them consume you, and also how you present those negative emotions. If you're going to someone and saying, or calling them names and being just really rather horrible to them because you're annoyed about something else, then you have failed as a virtuous person and you've failed as a stoic. But I would say to have a good outlook on life, you really need to think about why you think the way you do and why you feel the way you do about certain things. And yet at the same time, to not beat yourself up for feeling and thinking certain ways. One of the worst things you can do is think yourself a bad person because you feel in some way against something that you've been told is morally correct or even spiritually correct, because you end up resenting that commandment placed upon you. Say, for instance, if you are a Christian and um, there's some teaching of Jesus that you just can't quite gel with, and you think, well, actually, I'm not sure if it's actually this thing that he said is bad is actually as bad as he says it is. Instead of beating yourself up and thinking, well, I'm a bad Christian, and going down this spiral and thinking, well, what's the point of being a Christian at all if I'm never going to be able to be one? It'd be better to think, well, I don't quite gel with this. It's something I should pray on. It's something I should um, look up in the Bible, perhaps ask your vicar or pastor about, um, or perhaps just a friend and say, look, I'm really struggling with what Christ said about this thing, and um, I don't quite agree that it's as good as he says it is or as bad as he says it is. Um, Help me to understand what's going on with that, rather than thinking, well, I'm a bad person, I'm never going to be a proper Christian. Let's all hail the evil one and attend black masses and stuff like that. That's a bad thing to do. Don't never beat yourself up about anything, because at the end of the day, as long as you're not really doing anything particularly evil, as long as you're not killing people and like assaulting them in various ways and stealing and stuff, then there's always room for you to grow and to become more virtuous. And virtuosity brings me on to possibly my last point, or my last fundamental. To want to do good things, or to actually just do good things. You don't even necessarily need to want to do good things. Virtuosity isn't a negative trait in the sense that it's not about the things that you abstain from. It's more so about the things that you do, which a lot of people get wrong. So when somebody virtue signals, for instance, it's usually them saying, well, at least I'm not a racist, or at least I'm not a misogynist, or I'm so not racist and this and that because I support this thing or that thing. I'm not a racist because I love Israel, and that these kinds of things. Virtue signaling is usually a practice of negative virtue, in that it's not about what you've actually done or what you actually do. Rather, it's about what you are not. You know, I don't really care about the things you're not. I care about the things you do. If you're somebody who basically isn't evil but also isn't good, they don't do good things, they don't help people out when they need it, then you're a nothing person. You don't impact the people around you. You know, if you're not, even if it's just something as simple as being polite, that is a virtuous act because you're making someone's day better through you being nice to them, offering a friendly face, you know, a warm handshake, saying your pleases and thank yous. Even if it isn't reciprocated, it doesn't matter. Now, it should, especially with politeness, it should be understood that there will come a point when politeness becomes habit rather than something you actively or consciously do. Um, and there is a bit of a danger in making virtue too much of a habit, in the sense that it's something you do without thinking. Um, it is a good thing, but at the same time, it's not going to make you happy. Um, so saying your pleases and thank yous for a lot of British people, and I mean actual British people, not what some people call British people. For actual native British people, saying please and thank you is almost habit. It's in our nature. But if you can break away from that nature and assess why you say please and thank you, but in a positive assessment, so you think, rather than, you know, oh, why do we say please and thank you? It doesn't matter. People are just doing their jobs. Thinking, well, almost making excuses as to why you say please and thank you is probably a good thing. Even as something as saying your pleases and thank yous is a good exercise in virtue. But of course, with reality being what it is, you shouldn't just be reliant on your politeness, your pleases and thank yous. You should be actually doing things for other people. And by doing things for other people, this is where happiness comes into its fullness. If you simply do what people want you to do for them, you become a bitch and you become not happy. You become a dog that does the things that its master has told it to do. And people will see that you are this dog, this slave, and they will say, or they'll say to themselves, oh, I can get what I want from that person. And so more people will pressure you into doing things that you don't necessarily want to do yourself. But to do for others what they perhaps need is a good way to achieve happiness, because you're doing something meaningful, even if they'll never accept what you're trying to do for them. If you know that that thing is good for them, whether it's giving them a piece of advice, telling them to stop doing such and such, it's far better than letting someone rot. And it's far better than letting someone go down a path that they shouldn't be going down. If you simply submit to everyone and everything, you'll become very unhappy. But if you fight against the world and fight against people's wishes and stuff, you'll be in a constant state of conflict and won't be happy. Now, of course, all this advice is for the normal person, not he who loves conflict and derives some sick pleasure from it. But this isn't the full extent of what makes someone happy, but I think it is a good starting point. I want to give you tools that you can use to make things a little bit more bearable, to get over that hump of discontent. And it's not a reflection of your being weak or somehow invalid in some way. If you are upset or depressed, you know, there are very real reasons why you would be upset or depressed. But if you can employ some of my fundamentals and my techniques and my advice, then I'm sure that things would be a lot better. Now, don't hold religiously to them. If something doesn't work, it doesn't work, and try something else. You shouldn't be holding too fast to certain ideals outside of morality. If a tool doesn't work, the tool doesn't work, and you put it down, you get one that does. But if for some reason you don't like not stealing, then you need to stop stealing. There's the difference. Stick to morality, but use different tools. Now, one of the hardest things in life is to come out of a depression, because often the depression comes in a time period. People will have long or short periods of depression, and they'll be fine. They'll go into their depression, they'll come out, and they'll be basically fine again. Now, the hardest thing to do is to come out of that depression midway through. But I do believe that using some of the ideas that I've imparted onto you will help in coming out of it. But it is very difficult, and I know it's very difficult to employ things consciously when you are in a state of depression, because you are in a state of weakness, and you don't believe that if you do some of these things that they'll be effective enough. And they're not going to get you out of the depression. But they will be very useful in starting to come out of it, and perhaps it might shorten that period. So if you are struggling, please use these techniques or these fundamentals. Ask people for help. It's fine. You don't need to tell them all your problems, but just say, if you say to someone, I think I am struggling, could we go out for a coffee or something? And if they say, I haven't really got the time at the moment, don't worry about it. They may not want to spend time with you because you're a boring and miserable person, but likely they just don't have the time. People are very busy. So don't take things to heart is a good fundamental. And I guess that goes into not holding too much trust or hope in people. But as I say, again, don't distrust everyone, because there are good people in the world and they are everywhere. And it's fine. It's fine to trust people and find joy in them. And if friends come and go, they come and go, and it's not something you should really be worried about too much. Because at the end of the day, if you've made friends once, then realistically you should be able to make them again. There will be other parts to this video and to this concept, because it is a broad concept, and I don't think I've gone over everything I need to go over. But that will do it for today. Leave some suggestions in the comments about things that have helped you in the past, because I think a lot of people could do with some hope at the moment. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.